Hi, everyone. This is David, and welcome to week 4 of Business Communications. Week 4 is kind of a special week at Jack Welch Management Institute in that this is registration week. So this is the week that you are encouraged to visit your advisor and to go ahead and sign up for your summer classes. Go ahead and reserve your spot for this summer session in week 4, registration week. Now, week 4 in this class is also a time when we start talking about the written portion of communication, writing. Now, if you've read my biography in the classroom, you know that I'm kind of an old fella, that I have taught writing for several decades on the undergraduate and the graduate level. And for over a decade, I was a magazine editor and a magazine writer. And during all that time, more time than years than we can count on our fingers and toes, I've come to believe that all writers, including this one, make the same mistakes whenever we don't produce the writing that meets our best standards. And I wanted to tell you what I think those 3 mistakes are. Mistake number 1, I believe, is the failure to get feedback. Now think about this contradiction. Whenever we write alone with the words silent in our head. And yet we expect a completely different person with a completely different set of private language in his or her own head to completely understand what we wrote alone silently. It's not going to happen. It can never happen. Intellectually, cognitively, behaviorally, all of those things say that it cannot happen. Instead, we have to do something to get a real world reaction before we send it out. And that's why I recommend that your intended audience never be the second person to read what you wrote. You're always the first person. You wrote it. And in between yourself and the intended audience, put somebody else. Put a trusted colleague. Put a spouse. Put a friend. Put a coach. Put someone who will give you real world reaction to that thing that had been written silently alone. Give a real world reaction to it, to anticipate what's going to trip up an audience, to anticipate a wrong interpretation, to anticipate all the various things that can go wrong whenever somebody tries to translate those black squiggles on a screen of white into their own meaning in their own mind. You've got to have that buffer, that feedback. One last anecdote. In the publishing world, I can tell you beyond the shadow of a doubt this is true. Nothing gets in print unless it is read and edited by 5 other people than the author. And that doesn't include the lawyers sometimes. So if 5 to 8 other people have to read and react and improve something before it gets in print, why should our career documents, the ones that make the difference between our success and failure, why should those documents be treated any differently? I think you'll agree that they shouldn't. Okay, mistake number 2, template analysis. Everything that has been written, everything that will be written, follows a template, whether it's a get well card or a Shakespearean sonnet. And in the business world, there are just as many templates. Whether it's a white paper, whether it's an RFP, whether it's an inventory report, whether it's a job incident report, no matter what you write in the business world, somebody has written something like that before you. So you need to think about the category of the kind of thing you're writing. And in your company, in your specific group, find excellent examples of what has already been written in that genre, in that format, whether it be a jobs report, an incident report, an RFP, a white paper, a proposal, or whatever. Find it and follow it. Model what you write after it in terms of length, tone, use of headings and subheadings, and all that kind of technical stuff. Why? because one, it gives a sense of standardization in your particular company. And some companies are quite particular about what you write and present, conforming to a certain standard. But it also, whenever the reader picks it up, it would also give the reader a sense of familiarity, of having seen this before and feeling kind of at home with it. Okay, third and last thing. When you sit down to write, it is no longer about you. It is not about your self-image. It is not about your mood. It is not about your career, although it really is. It is, or should be, about one thing and one thing only: the audience. What does the audience need to know? What is the audience feeling? And what should you do about what they're feeling and what they need to know? And don't fool yourself in thinking that emotions are not a part of business writing. They're very much a part of business writing. That's why one chapter of your book this week devotes itself to maintaining a positive tone, an upbeat tone, whenever you speak to an audience, and how to do that. So keep those three things in mind, those three mistakes that I give to you from my experience, as you go into this writing portion of your week 4 in this particular course. Now, let's go ahead and review the assignment materials and the actual assignments that you have this week. We start, as always, by clicking on week 4, and up pops the week 4 materials. And we have a quote by Sir Richard Branson about the 3 things that you should keep in mind. Notice how good things always come in 3. Keep it simple, keep it positive, keep it professional. Simple means use as few words as possible and use as many lists as possible. In other words, make your paragraphs short and use as few paragraphs as you can. Keep it positive. That's what we were talking about earlier, about always considering your audience and their feelings, always finding that positive ground, always focusing on the you, because they're always asking themselves, what's really in it for me? Keeping it professional refers to writing standards whenever it comes to how you express yourself in style, grammar, punctuation, and other matters of usage. Okay, so there are your 4 goals this week. Strategically plan written communications, apply writing techniques to optimize communication, develop written presence, and developing your written presence is as important when it comes to authenticity and your ability to engage others as is your spoken presence. Compose professional documents. That means maintaining the standards of written English. Okay, your weekly materials. We've got a PDF here that gives you some great advice on composing, takes you through the composition process and the 3 pillars of effective writing that we've already covered. Keep it simple. Remember, bottom line up front, keep it positive, authentic, candid, upbeat, gaining that rapport with your audience, always thinking about them, and then, of course, making it correct. And we have a writing coach, and we have other writing tools that can help you do that. Okay, that's a great PDF. Then you have chapters from the Munter and Hamilton book. These are very detailed chapters. Chapter 2 covers the entire writing process. And by the way, you have a writing process, whether you know it or not. The trick is to improve that process by being more conscious of its parts and being more capable of manipulating and being successful at each part of the writing process. Macro issues have to do with content and organization, and micro issues have to do with word choice, punctuation, spelling, and those kinds of things. Then comes a list of documents from the Harvard Business Review. I highly recommend that you download these, print them out, and keep them. Keep them either on your computer or in a folder somewhere. And whenever you have to write a memo or report, review this Harvard Business Review version of it. The same thing with emails. You have some great advice on emails here. And the other forms of business writing. These are highly concise, highly detailed, highly practical guides. Now, your discussion this week. First, you're going to select and then post a professional communication that you've written in the past. It can be an email, but make sure it's an email of at least 300 words. It can be a memo, or it can be a letter. And please don't include any personal identifiers or other sensitive information for purposes of confidentiality. Now, after you have found that professional communication and you have reposted it in redacted form, then you're going to analyze its effectiveness. In other words, you're going to provide a kind of self-analysis. You're going to look at the tone. Was it appropriate for the audience? Did you maintain a professional, upbeat, positive, common ground tone? Did you use headings and subheadings? Was the subject line specific enough? By the way, studies have found that the number one error in emails is a failure to be specific in the subject line. Was its content condensed enough? Did it have a logical structure, style, length? Was consideration of your audience apparent, clear and concise? Did you demonstrate positive presence? And what changes would you make and why? You're not being asked to rewrite it here. You're just being asked to analyze what changes you would make and why. Then you have another LinkedIn assignment. In this case, the LinkedIn assignment is about getting recommendations. The more the merrier, the more specific the merrier. And this PDF has some excellent advice on how to contact the people who are going to write these recommendations and how to ask them to write a recommendation that's really going to work for you. There's some very good advice here on recommendations. Now, just to anticipate your assignment that's coming up in week 6, you might want to already get started on it. Let me pump this up a little bit. Keep in mind, this is worth 25% of your final grade. Let's go to the assignment instructions. For this assignment, you will apply the key concepts from week 1 through 6 to evaluate and improve a deteriorating business communication situation. Now, note the channel of choice for these types of communications may actually have been speaking to the individual, but for the purposes of this assignment, we're going to pre-select the channel for you and say that the channel, for whatever reasons, is written. Now let's look at the specific instructions. Read the Cherie Cosmetics Limited Elegante Division case study several times. That's probably elegant rather than elegante. Then, after you have read that case study, write a 3 to 5 page paper that addresses the following. Now remember, these should be subheads, and remember your subheads should be specific, not generic. Summarize the case study, 1 to 2 paragraphs. Identify the key communication issues of the case. Sounds like a good time for a bullet list to me. Revise the inter-office correspondence to Bob Shaw. That's going to be 1 to 2 pages. And then explain your revised approach and how it will lead to a more productive outcome. In other words, you must explain the changes that you made and why you made them. So this is probably a 3 to 4 page project that you're going to turn in and be evaluated for 25% of your overall grade. 25% of your grade. Now with a project that counts this much, of course you're going to want to get an early start on it, and 2, you're going to want to apply that number 1 rule that I gave you at the opening of this video, and that is give yourself a chance to get feedback on it. In this case, if you finish early and wish to send it to me for feedback, that's fine. I also encourage you to get feedback on it from our writing coach, Susan Nobler, and there's a form in your classroom for doing that. I encourage you to get writing feedback from your colleagues. The more feedback, the better. Remember, in the publishing world, nothing got published unless it was read and re-edited at least 5 times, not counting the lawyers, by other people. If we want to do our best writing, I think we should take that into consideration. Okay, you guys, best of luck on week 4. I'll see you in the classroom.